I'm joined in studio by international affairs analyst dperry, also the author of Ask Questions Later newsletter, as well as our I24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. Trump is celebrating. He says we are on the path towards victory. But is that the case, or is he putting the cart before the horse?
To a certain degree, he is. That's in the nature of Trump, I fear. And he wants credit for a huge achievement and eternal peace in the Middle East. I don't want to diminish the drama of what has happened. The main drama happened some weeks and indeed 2 months ago when the entire Arab League agreed to the principle of disarming Hamas. This is part of the process that maybe inevitably followed that crossing of the major Rubicon. Now, as for Hamas's reply to the 20-point plan, I wouldn't even call it a yes, but I would simply say it's not a no. And that may be good enough right now. And there certainly is value in their having accepted one of the points, which is that whenever there is the implementation of a deal, in the first 72 hours, all hostages living and dead are released. That's meaningful, to be sure. It suggests that they accept that once the deal begins implementation, they don't want to keep cards in their hands until they're sure Israel doesn't walk away, for example. There's some trust in that, and there's an acquiescence to a demand in that. But the main thing that has been preventing an end to the war, that the Israeli government has been insisting on, with a lot of support in the Israeli public, and indeed implicitly in among global governments, even though no one's happy with the conduct of the war and the brutality. But everyone kind of agrees Hamas has to disarm. That is the main point, other than the hostages, of the 20 points. And they haven't agreed to that. And I assess in their reports that there's there's disagreements among Hamas, where Izzeddin al-Haddad, the main Hamas commander left standing in the Strip, wants to at least retain, if not rockets and really heavy weaponry, or at least some weaponry, which is not good enough for Israel. And unless they are brought to cross that Rubicon as well, the whole thing might fall apart, despite Trump's great interest in finishing it by at least Thursday so he can collect a Nobel Prize on Friday. There's one thing I want to say. It comes down to something essential that has been a little underreported. On the same day that Netanyahu apologized to the Prime Minister of Qatar last Monday, and the big deal was announced, with Trump presenting it as eternal peace last Monday. Also last Monday, there was an executive order giving Qatar effectively the status of a NATO member, where it states that a future attack on Qatar is an attack on the interests of the U.S., and the U.S. will reply diplomatically and militarily. That basically means if Israel tries to attack Doha again, Hamasniks in Doha, it's a war with the U.S., which is fantastical and absurd. But that is, in theory, what the U.S. gave Qatar. It's astonishing. And really, a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads about this. The only way it makes any sense is if that was a down payment to Qatar to bring Hamas along, to not just state that we support the deal, which they did do, and that's important, but to bring Hamas along, to twist their arms until they break if need be, so that this happens, to make clear to Hamas that not one more dinar, not one more shekel is headed their way if they don't sign on the deal. And the deal that Israel agreed to last Monday is not the deal that Hamas has yet agreed to. So right now it comes down to Qatar, I do believe, to put its money where the deal is, and to actually make sure that Hamas does not drag out these talks for weeks and weeks, which is undoubtedly their intention, but sometime in the very near future agrees actually to the 20 points. And maybe there's a negotiation over details, but not over the essence. And right now we have not yet agreed on the essence. So while I recognize it's a historic moment, it isn't yet an agreement to the deal. And we will find out in coming days if this is real or not. And I think despite the celebrations, if it turns out to not be real, the war could resume, and this time with a serious carte blanche from Trump to
have this pressure
to go as far as Israel needs to go.
The father of hostage Imran Cohen says he's concerned both sides, Netanyahu or Hamas, they might make the deal fall apart.
Hamas said yes to negotiation. It didn't say yes to the plan. That means there's going to be negotiation. Of course, Trump took that as a yes, saying everything must end now, and finally forced Netanyahu to go to ceasefire. The concerns that can come from three sides. One side is, of course, Hamas. He will start playing games. Other concern is Netanyahu. He will start to play games. And the third concern is, maybe Trump will lose interest. Netanyahu was actually dreaming that Hamas will say no. That is his next dream, because Netanyahu concerned about keeping his coalition. He knows that this deal, as it's defined, will lose him his precious Ben-Gvir and Smotrich.
All of this breaking news is happening during Shabbat. Many of the members in Netanyahu's cabinet are unaware, likely, of the news that is unfolding right now. They've heard it maybe through the grapevine, but they haven't been able to comment on it publicly. What is the fear of the internal discourse that we could see come sunset tonight?
I understand Yehuda's fear, and I have shared his skepticism about Netanyahu over these 2 years of the war. I am not unaware of the plausibility of claims that Netanyahu introduced politics into his decisions about whether or not about what position to take about the war. Of course, there is a real risk that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the right-wing flank in the coalition might again threaten to bring down the coalition if Israel doesn't do X, Y, and Z, doesn't take whatever position in the talks. Two things, though. I'm not so sure that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have too much to worry about right now, because Israel's sort of been boxed into a position where either Hamas does break or they're going to continue the war. I don't think there's too much fear from the right wing's point of view that Hamas will refuse to disarm, and Trump will then say, all right, we're going ahead of the deal anyway. So if Hamas accepts the deal in a real way, that is pretty close to surrender terms. And even Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, they'll be disappointed that they can't resettle Gaza with Jews and all the rest of it. But they won't have a leg to stand on. And so the deal is so good for Israel that I think everyone's going to give these negotiations in Cairo time. And if it works out, then there's not much these right-wingers can do. The second thing is, the political calculus for Netanyahu has changed, because, maybe 2 years ago, when no one thought he could survive the cataclysm of October 7th and just the monumental failures of that day, he really depended on his coalition, and his government was in its early days. And the collapse of the coalition would have almost certainly meant his removal from the office of prime minister. And so many people, all polls show, a majority of Israelis think that this is what was driving his thinking. I must remain prime minister. Now it's different. Netanyahu is likely going to elections in 1 year or less. My guess is in 9 months. And the continuation of the war and the sacrificing of the hostages from this point onward is unpopular. And so I understand Yehuda when he fears that Netanyahu wanted Hamas to say no, but I disagree with him. I think there's a limit to cynicism about Netanyahu. He wants the war to end, and he wants the hostages to come home. I mean, he has certain terms, but I think people can criticize him too much. And the second thing is, his political calculus is different. His coalition is gone in 9 months anyway. He's going to elections in between 9 and 11 months anyway. He has to end the war for political purposes, even if he doesn't feel the same imperative that a lot of Israelis do. I think he wants the war to end. He wants Hamas to be made to accept the deal. And he knows that if it does, a lot of people will forgive him for the overlong war. Because if you look at the achievements of Israel during the war, the schooling of Iran and the setting back of its nuclear program and missile program, the crushing of the so-called axis of evil, the Shiite circle of fire around Israel, the Hezbollah, pretty close right. You have the governor of Lebanon trying to disarm Hezbollah. If the deal goes through, Hamas being disarmed. These are major, major things. Hostages, most of them will have been returned alive, I believe, certainly around half or more. Netanyahu will be sitting in a decent position electorally. It'll be the right thing from every point of view to do the deal if Hamas does accept it. It'll be the right thing Jewishly. And these opponents of ending the war are theoretically pious Jews.